No, that's exactly why I like the custom. And so when we have the family service on Shabbat morning or the religious school class service and things like that, that's where we do exactly that and people come and gather around. So, wow. I can pull the Torah out. I could read from. I can do. It's okay. Let me just get a couple more things ready. No, Friday. Yeah. It's a lovely service. It's a lovely service. So apologies for those who are following online for our slightly delayed start, Our Torah study this morning was deeply engaging and we overran. We gathered together for our Shabbat Shacharit service, our Shabbat morning service. which starts on page 74 with the black numbers in the pages, not using the blue numbers, but the black numbers in the pages, page 74. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael. On the next page, page 76, we find a prayer which we referred to in our Torah study this morning, which thanks God for our bodies and for the bodies being not inappropriately opening or closing at the wrong time. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher yatsa et ha'adam b'chokhmah, uvaravo nekavim nekavim, chalulim chalulim, galui v'yadua lifnei chisei chavodecha, she'im yipateach echad mehen, o yisatem echad mehen, I efshar lehitkayem v'la'amod lefanecha. Baruch atah Adonai, rofei chol basar, u'mafli la'asot. And on page 78. Elohai neshama shenatata bi torahi. Elohai neshama shenatata bi torahi. Elohai neshama shenatata bi torahi. Ata vrata, ata yitzata, ata nefachtach bi, v'ata meshamrach b'kibi, kol zeman shehaneshama b'kibi, modeh ani lefanecha, Adonai Elohai, v'Elohei avotai v'imotai, Ribon kol hamahasim, Adon kol hanashamot, Baruch atah Adonai, Asher biyado nefesh kol chai, v'ruach kol b'saish. On page 80 and onwards, we find the Nisim B'chol Yom, the prayers, the blessings that thank God for the differing parts of recognition of the morning. These were traditionally the prayers that were recited as we woke up. So as we opened our eyes, we would thank God who opens the eyes of the blind. As we sat up, we would thank God who lifts up the fallen. As we took our first steps, we would thank God on page 82 who strengthens our steps. As we got dressed, we would thank God who clothes the naked. The rabbis understood, however, that many people were too tired to do these first thing in the morning, and so they brought them all into the service. So our Nisim B'chol Yom start on page 80. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lasech v'bina, lehavchin ben yom uvein laila. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, rokah haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hameichim mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, malbish arumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hanoten liyahev koach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hama'avish einai me'einai, utnu ma'mei afapai. 84. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani b'tselem Elohim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani ben chorim.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, ozeh Yisrael bigvura. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, otei Yisrael betifara. There is a custom of studying each day and reciting the prayer before study. Because we are just a little short of a minyan today, we're going to, instead of reading from the Torah scroll, we're going to use the Torah as our study passage, which means we skip the traditional prayer for study now and come back to it later. And instead we move to the traditional prayer Yishtabach on page 105. And that leads us into Chatzi Kaddish, which is a doxology, a praise of God that has been recited, we know, at least since Temple times, for at least 2,000 years. And that leads us into Baruch Hu as well on page 108. For those who are able, I invite you to rise as you are able on page 105 first for Yishtabach. Yishtabach Shimcha Lad Makenu, Ha'el HaMelech HaGadol VaHaKadosh, B'Shamayim u'Ba'aretz, Ki Lecha Na'eh Adonai Eloheinu, V'Elohei Avoteinu V'Imoteinu, She'u Shvacha Halel V'Zimra, Ozu Memshala, Netzach Gdula u'Gevura, Tehila v'Tiferet, Kedusha u'Malchut, Barachot v'Hodaot, Me'ata v'Ad Olam. Baruch atah Adonai, El Melech Gadol Batishbachot, El HaHodaot, Adon HaNiflaot, Abochei b'Shirei Zimra, Melech Elchei HaOlamim. Chatzi Kaddish is on 106. Yitkada v'yitkada Shemei Rabbah, Ba'alma divra chirutei, V'yamlich malchutei, V'chayechon uv'yomechon, uv'chayedecho Beit Yisrael, Ba'gala, Ba'gala, uv'izman karib, V'imoru, Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabbah Mevarach, La'alam u'la'mei almaya, Yitbarach, Yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitbar v'yitromam, v'yitnaseh v'yitada, v'yitaleh, v'yitalal, Shemei de'kudesha b'richu. Leila min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata, damiran bihama, v'imuru amen. Baruch Hu is on 108. Ya Elai, Ya Elai, Ya Elai, Ya Elai, Ya Elai, Ya Elai, those who are standing, please feel free to be seated. As we turn to page 110 in the middle of the page. Praised are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, creator of light and darkness, who makes peace and fashions all things. In mercy you illumine the world and those who live upon it. In your goodness you daily renew creation. How numerous are your works, Adonai. In wisdom you form them all, filling the earth with your creatures. Be praised, Adonai our God, for the excellent work of your hands, and for the lights you created, may they glorify you. Shine a new light upon Zion, that we all may swiftly merit its radiance. Praised are you, Adonai, creator of all heavenly lights. Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzeh HaMa'orot. On page 112, we prepare for Shema. Shema is a prayer in which we talk of our love for God. Before that, Ahava Rabbah talks of God's love for us. Ahava Rabbah Havtanu, Adonai Eloheinu, Chemla Gdola V'Teira, Kamalta Leinu, Ba'avo Avoteinu, Ve'imotenu, Shevatchu B'cha, Avo Imotenu, Vatlamdem Chukei Chayim, Kentuchonenu Tlamdenu, Amrachem, Rachem Aleinu, V'tem B'libenu Lahavinu Lahaskir Lishmoa, Lilmodu Lelamed, Lishmo V'lasot, Ukayem et Kol Divrei, Talmud Torah Techa B'Yahava, V'ha'erinenu B'Toratecha, V'dabe Klibenu B'mitzvotecha, V'yached Levavenu, Yava Yira et Shemecha, V'lo nevosh, V'lo nikalem, V'lo nikashel, Le'olam va'ed, Ki v'shem kodshecha, Hagadol v'hanora b'hatachnu, Nagila v'nismacha, Nagila v'nismacha v'shuatecha. At the foot of the page, Baruch atah Adonai, Abocheh b'amo Yisrael, B'yahava. Either seated or standing according to your custom, Shema starts on page 140. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And continuing on page 160. V'yahavta et Adonai Elohecha, v'chol levavecha, v'chol nafshecha, v'chol ma'adecha, v'hayu advarim ha'ele, asher anochi mitzavacha, hayom al levavecha, v'shinantam levanecha, v'dibata b'ham, v'shivtacha b'veitecha, v'v'lechtecha v'aderech, v'shachbacha v'kumecha, v'kshartam lehot al yadecha, v'hayu letatafot bein einecha, v'chatavtam amuzazot beitecha v'sharecha. 118. V'yomei Adonai el Moshe lemor, daber el b'nei Yisrael, v'amata aleihem, v'asu lahem tzitzit, al kanfei bigdeihem ledoratam, v'natnu al tzitzit hakanaf letir techelet, v'haya lachem letzitzit, v'ritem oto, v'zchartem et kol mitzvot Adonai, v'asitem otam, v'lo taturu, acharei levavechem, v'acharei einechem, asher atem zonim achareihem, laman tizkaru, v'asitem et kol mitzvotai, v'hitem kadoshim lelohechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Amen. Those who are standing, please feel free to be seated. There are those who may be standing online, who follow online. As Pesach starts next week, we turn to page 123 in the middle of the page. What is my life span? I'm like one who has gone out of Egypt. The Red Sea parts. I cross on dry land. 2 walls of water, on my right and on my left. Pharaoh's army and his horsemen behind me. Before me the desert, perhaps the promised land too. That is my lifespan. As we turn to page 124, we start Tefillah, the central prayer of our service. We start Tefillah, which is also known as the Amidah, the standing prayer, and so in a moment we'll rise. We start Tefillah with a reflection, a meditation that God may help us pray. It's an extraordinary prayer, praying that God may help us pray. And then we continue with the Tefillah on the following pages. For those who are able, I invite you to rise as we start our Tefillah on page 124.
Adonai sefatai teftach, ufia yitehelatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, El HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei HaKol, V'zocher Chasdei Ahavot v'Imahot, Mevi Gula Lifnei Bneihem, Laman Shemo v'Yahava, Melech Ozer Moshio U'Magin, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ve'Ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor le'elam Adonai, Mechayei HaKol atah Rav le'Hoshia, Mashiv HaRuach u'Morit HaGashem, Mechalkel Chayim b'Chesed, Mechayei HaKol b'Rachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim b'Rofeh Cholim, U'Matir Asurim, U'Mekayem Emunato L'Shenei Afav, V'Chamocha b'Gvurot, U'Mido Melech, Melech Memit U'Mechayeh, U'Masmiach Yeshua, V'Ne'emanat al Hachayot HaKol. Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayei HaKol. 1/3. Nekadesh et Shimcha ba'olam, Kishem shemakdishim oto b'shmei maron, Kakatov al yad neviecha, V'kara ze'er ze'er ve'amar, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot, Meloch kol haaretz, Kevodo, Adir Adirenu Adonai, Adonenu Mahadir, Shimcha b'chol haaretz, Baruch kavod Adonai, Mimkomo, Echadu Eloheinu, U'avinu Malkeinu, U'moshienu v'Yashmienu, V'rachamav le'nei kol chai. Ani Adonai Elohechem, Yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Yitzion, Ledor Ador, Alleluia.
טוב אדוני גדלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש. ושבחך אלוהינו מתינו לא ימוש, לעולם לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. Page 134. Our God and God of our ancestors, be pleased with our rest. Sanctify us with your mitzvot, and grant us a share in your Torah. Satisfy us with your goodness, and gladden us with your salvation. Purify our hearts to serve you in truth. In your gracious love, Adonai our God, grant us your holy Shabbat as a heritage. May Israel, who sanctifies your name, rest on Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. And on page 130, Modim anachnu lach, she'atahu Adonai Eloheinu, v'elehei avotenu v'imotenu, le'olam va'ed. Sur chayenu magen ishenu, atahu v'dor v'dor. Nodeh lecha v'nesaper tehilatecha, al chayenu hamasurim b'yadecha, v'anishmotenu hapkudot lach, v'anisecha shebachol yom imanu, v'aniflotecha v'tovatecha, shebachol eight, erev v'hoker v'tzohorah. Atov kilo chal rechamech, v'hamrachem kilo tamach chasedecha, me'elam kivinuha. Al kulam yitzvarach v'yitromam shimcha malkeinu tamid le'elam v'ed. V'chol hachayim yudu chased, v'halelu et shimcha v'emet, ha'el yeshuatenu ve'ezratenu salah. Baruch atah Adonai, atov shimcha, l'chana et l'chol. And on page 141 in the middle of the page, grant us peace, your most precious gift, O eternal source of peace. Give us the will to proclaim its message to all the peoples of the earth. Bless our country as a safeguard of peace, its advocate among the nations. May contentment reign within our borders, health and happiness within our homes. Strengthen the bonds of friendship and fellowship among all the inhabitants of our land. Plant virtue in every soul. May the love of your name hallow every home and every heart. Praised are you, Adonai, who blesses your people with peace. Baruch atah Adonai, Mavarech et Amo Yisrael, Shalom. We conclude our tefillah on page 142, either with a traditional prayer or with the prayer in our own hearts. Say shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Oh, say shalom bimroma, say shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Yahaseh shalom, Yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Yahaseh shalom, Yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Yahaseh shalom, Yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Yahaseh shalom, Yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael.
Those who are standing, please feel free to be seated.
I mentioned earlier that because we are just short of a minyan that instead of pulling out the Torah scroll, which is probably a good idea because I really hurt my shoulder this week anyway, instead of that we study from the Torah, a brief study. So if you wish, grab a Chumash, one of the larger books. The blessing before study in our Siddur, early in our Siddur, La'asok b'divrei Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. The chapter that I'm going to read from, and I'm going to read two different parts from this chapter, is Leviticus chapter 15. It's on page 852, page 852 of the Plaut Chumash. And I will share, in 20 years of the rabbinate, I don't think I have ever read this as the Torah reading. And so I will read excerpts from it. I will read verses 1 to 6, and then I will read verses 19 to, let me get this right, to 24. And then I will read the translation, and then I will provide a little commentary as to why I've shared this reading. Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe ve'el Aharon le'mor, dabro el bnei Yisrael, v'amartem aleihem, ish, ki yihyeh zav mibsaro, zovot hamehu, v'zot tihyeh tum'ato b'zovot, rad b'saro et zavo, o hechtim b'saro mizuvo tum'ato hi, kol hamishkav asher yishkav alav hazav yitama, v'chol hakli asher yeshev alav yitma, v'ish asher yiga b'mishkavo yechabes begadav v'rachatz b'mayim v'tamei at ha'arev v'hayoshev al hakli asher yeshev alav hazahav yechabes begadav v'rachatz b'mayim v'tamei at ha'arev. The Eternal spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when a man has any discharge issuing from his member, he's unclean. The uncleanness from his discharge shall mean the following: whether his member runs with a discharge or is stopped up so that there is discharge, his uncleanness means this: any bedding on which the one with the discharge lies shall be unclean, and every object on which he sits shall be unclean. And whoever touches his bedding shall wash their clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. Whoever sits on an object on which the one with the discharge has sat shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening." On verse 19 on page 853. Vaishad ki tihyeh zahav dam, yihyeh zova b'bsara, shivat yamim tihyeh begidata, v'chol hanogea ba yitma at ha'arev, v'chol asher tishkav alav b'nidata yitma, v'chol asher teshev alav yitma, v'chol hanogea b'mishkava yechabes begadav v'rachatz b'mayim v'tamei at ha'arev, v'chol hanogea b'chol kli asher teshev alav yechabes begadav v'rachatz b'mayim v'tamei at ha'arev. When a woman has a discharge, her discharge being blood from her body, She shall remain in her impurity 7 days. Whoever touches her shall be unclean until evening. Anything that she lies on during her impurity shall be unclean, and anything that she sits on shall be unclean. Anyone who touches her bedding shall wash their clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. Anyone who touches any object on which she has sat shall wash their clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. Be it the bedding or be it the object on which she has sat, and touching it they shall become unclean until the evening. Why have I shared this reading? Of all the readings? Well, in part because I don't have much of a choice. Tazria Metzorah is usually a double Torah portion, but this is a leap year, and so we have an extra month, Adar Sheni, which we have celebrated, and so therefore we split off all the Torah readings. So instead of Tazria Metzorah, the two portions being read as one, we split them off, which means we're forced to read Metzorah. And Metzorah is the portion that Tazria is the portion that particularly deals with leprosy, and Metzorah is the portion that deals with emissions. And as we saw in our Torah study earlier this morning, there is, I think, something extremely powerful and extremely important about this reading. For one thing, even though later Jewish practice became so deeply patriarchal that it saw the women's period as being impure and therefore she shouldn't be touched, and there was nothing similar for the men, that Jewish men, particularly Orthodox men, never turn around and say, I've had an emission, don't touch me. Whereas there is this concept of shomer negia, guarding the touch, not touching a woman just in case. That isn't the case in Torah. And I think that's really important because it shows us that some of the patriarchal or sexist elements in Judaism weren't there originally and only came from later medieval patriarchal society. Because this chapter is split exactly down the middle. The first half deals with male emission, and the second half deals with female emission. And we have to be really careful about what impure or unclean means. Because in our society, unclean means dirty, taboo. Whereas this is taboo, this is uncleanness in a different way. What this means relates to the fact, as we saw in our Torah study, that the rabbis saw, and Torah sees, blood and semen as two very similar things, drops which give life. And therefore, while it is within the body, a person is invigorated with the possibility of creating life. When it has left the body, the person essentially has less life in them. And that is what makes them what Torah calls unclean or impure. In other words, they are not fully alive. And you may debate that, and you may turn around and say, but this is a natural cycle, especially for women, this is a natural aspect. Whereas for the male discharge, it doesn't work on a natural cycle. Of course, there's totally understandable critique. I think for the ancient biblical concept of life, though, which led into the rabbinic concept of life, as we saw in our Torah study in Tractate Nida, in Talmud, there are three who help create a human being. The Father creates the white drop of semen, the Mother creates the red drop of semen, and God creates the rest. And the white drop becomes the bones and other things, the red drop becomes the blood and the skin, and what God provides is the soul and the animus and the ability to think and hear and smell, the senses, all the neurological things. And Talmud says, near the end of a person's life, God withdraws that, and what is left is the elements of the two single drops. And so these are the fundamental building blocks of life. And Torah saw them as sacred. Torah saw them as essential, as being in a human being, because when they are within a human being, they have potential to create life. And that, I think, is a totally unique theology, particularly in the Levant, in the Middle East around the time. The idea that this isn't dirty like icky, this definitely isn't something shameful. This is not somebody walking around, as we saw in Tazria, when somebody has a scale disease. They walk around the camp, they have to cover their mouth, which is a fascinating thing. Millennia before facial masks and COVID-19, they have to cover their mouth and say that they are impure. They have to announce it to the camp so that everyone socially distances. If only everyone had listened to Torah then, at least. Nowadays, many more people, I think, would still be alive. Whereas there they have to announce. Here this isn't announcing. This is just stepping away from society, the society of life essentially, for a brief period, and then cleansing in a way of being able to ritually return to the possibility of creating life. And so I think it's really important to read this so that we get over our Western embarrassment of bodily functions, bodily fluids, and so on, and say Torah is teaching us something really important here, that all people have the potential, and it's not, of course, aware necessarily of sterility and so on, even though in Genesis there are those who cannot give birth, it is aware of it in that way. The assumption is that most people are able to give birth, and it is that, or to create life, I should say, and it is that which is so essential. And so Torah here, even though it seems icky and embarrassing, what Torah is talking about is the joy of life, celebrating life, celebrating for those who are able to the ability to create life. And whenever that ability is hampered, just to move out of the camp of the living for a little while and hopefully to return. So we can see this not as something embarrassing and gross, but as something empowering and particularly celebrating life. We move back to our Siddur, to our prayer book on page 253. We think of those within our community and outside our community in need of healing at this time. Mi sheberach avotenu, mekor habracha li'imotenu. May the source of strength to bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing. And let us say, Amen. We pray in particular at this time for healing, for comfort, and for support. For Gail Kaufman Craven, Kathleen Nadler, Leah Butt Gershon Vaudia, Neil Radin, George Gollum, Lila Eckel, Cassandra Wenzel, Nora Gluck, Carl Stalmacher, Ellen Lowenberg, Stephen Sherry Harwood, Jan Simonoff, Jane Siegel, Frank Remmert, Barbara Meyer, Carol Rudman, Jane Hochberg, Carlos Villarreal, and Gary Polkowitz, as well as for Scott Lewis, Sophie Hochberg-Farah, Ingrid Gustafsson, Jerry Steinberg, Faggy Marks, James Hetherington, Sandra Levine, Martha Ramirez, Cindy Pabst, Ann Lesa, Kathy Romero, Maria Romero, Marsha Landry, Carmen Rodriguez, Jerry Nuri Home, Aaron Eckel, and Ariana Chavez. And if you know of anyone in need of healing at this time, please feel free to share their name out loud. Mi sheberach imotenu, mekor habracha li'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shalema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. We wish refuah shalema, a complete and total healing to all those who we have named, and also to all those whom we hold in our hearts. We turn on in our Siddur to page 283. We start our concluding prayers with Aleinu, our version of Aleinu on page 283, 284, and 287. I'm invite you to rise as you are able. Ushamo, Ushamo Echad. We remain standing as we turn to page 294. As we think of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, and as we also remember those who died at this season in years past, and also those whom we have drawn into our hearts with our own. We remember particularly at this time during Shloshim Mani Marzak. And on the yard sites we remember David Herson, Charles Bennett, Jeffrey Bozek, Fernanda Goelet, Ignace Heggie, Dylan Herzenberg, Elsie Landau, Norman Lazin, Esther Lerner, Dorothy Marks, Boris Movshovich, Michael Newberg, Ann Novenson, Sylvia Oberstein, Alma Olafson, Rose Pinsky, Elaine Rudolph, May Spitz, Jacobo Trujillo, and Gertrude Van Gelderen. Is there anyone else being remembered at this time? On page 294. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, ba'alma divra chirutei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayachon v'yomechon, v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, v'agala v'zman kari v'yemu. Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach la'alam u'lalmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ah v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yithada v'yit'alei v'yithalel, shemei dikudusha barichu, ve'ela min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran ba'alma v'yemu. Amen. Yehi shalama Rabbah min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yemu. Amen. Osei shalom b'mamar, u'ya'asei shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yemu. Amen. Please be seated. Round off our service on page 321. On page 321, Adon Olam Hashem Malach. Adon Olam Hashem Malach, בטרם כל יסיר נברא, לעת נעשה בחפצו, אזי מלך שמו נקרא, ואחרי ככלותו, לבדו ימלוך נורא, והוא היה והוא הווה, והוא יהיה בתפארה, והוא אחד ואין שני. להמציא לו להכבירה, בלי ראשית, בלי תכלית, ולא העוז והמשרה, והוא אלי וחי גואלי, וצוחב לי בעת צרה, והוא ניסי ומנוס לי, מנת כוסי ביום אקרא, בידו הפקיד רוחי. הייתי שם ויעירה, ועם רוחי גבייתי, אדוני לי ולא יירא. Please rise as you are able for our concluding blessing. Yivarchenu Adonai v'shmarenu. May God bless us and keep us. Ya'er Adonai panav eleinu v'chunenu. May God's face shine upon us and be gracious to us. Yisa Adonai panav eleinu v'yasem lanu shalom. May God lift up the divine presence toward us and always grant us peace. Let us say, Amen. Shabbat Shalom. We could do an Ein Kelohenu to wrap up as well if you want. That's a good request. Where is Ein Kelohenu? Well, which tune do you know? The Ein Kelohenu? Do you know that one? Oh, wow. Okay, see if I can do that. Ein Kelohenu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kamakenu, Ein Kamoshienu, Michelohenu, Michadonenu, Michamakenu, Michamoshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Amakenu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Makenu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu. Our Kiddush can be found on page 300. No, it's very old school, I like it. Our Kiddush can be found on page 300, and then that's followed by our Motzi, for which we have an entire challah, so if we don't finish it, you can take it home, or I can give it to others pre-Pesach. Kiddush is on page 300. 300. V'shamnu b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש. על כן ברך אדוני את יום השבת וקדשהו. סברי חברי. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. B'te'avon, Shabbat Shalom. For those following online, we wish you Shabbat Shalom. Please, let me just